The title of our program is Developing the Leaders of Tomorrow, Mindsets, Diversity, and the Dream. As you know, our common reading for this year is Carol Dweck's Mindsets. And last semester we focused more on this topic inwardly. And this semester we want to look at it outwardly. How do we, as people who are being prepared or people who are serving others, how do we look at our mindsets and how we work with people who look different from us when we're trying to help them to develop a growth mindset? So this is our focus for the evening. Now let me take a few minutes to introduce our distinguished guests for the evening. Mr. Omékongo Dibinga, our featured speaker, is an artist and is a Les Brown Platinum motivational speaker, CNN contributor, diversity educator, trilingual poet, and positive rapper. He is also the founder and CEO of Free Your Mind Publishing, and his work on diversity, motivation, achievement, and empowerment has appeared on TV and radio in over 150 countries and has been globally adapted for curricula in K-12 schools and universities. His latest book and CD are entitled Grow Towards Your Greatness, 10 Steps to Living Your Best Life. Currently, he is completing his doctoral dissertation in social foundations at the University of Maryland, College Park, and we're fortunate to have him as a visiting lecturer here in the Curry School of Education, where he is teaching EDLF 5000 multicultural education. Our panelists are Julie Roa, Orrin McLean, and Chapin Falconer. Julie is a multicultural student services program coordinator for the Office of the Dean of Students here at UVA. Orrin is a former public school mathematics teacher, and currently he serves as an assistant dean in the Office of African American Affairs, and Orrin is a Curry alum, so graduated with a PhD in mathematics. And then Chapin is a licensed professional counselor in private practice and a watercolor artist. So the program will proceed as follows. We'll first hear from Omékongo, then we'll have about 10 minutes to hear from our panelists and the journeys that they have taken as they have developed their mindsets. And then we will have a Q&A session so that you all in the audience can ask questions of our guests. Finally, we will have Justin Thompson, who is our Associate Dean for Management and Planning, to give our closing comments on behalf of Dean Pianta, who is traveling today. At the end of the program, Omékongo, there's a table outside, and Omékongo is going to have his publications out there for those of you who wish to purchase them. Also, if you haven't done so already, there are refreshments out here. So at the end of the program, help yourself to those. So at this point, please join me in welcoming our guests.
When I was young, they used to call me a monster. African, bushman, monkey, I was bothered. They used to pick on my clothes. I didn't have Nikes. I didn't have nice bikes, other fancy things. I didn't have much money, no savings, no trust fund. So walking out my house every day was not fun. Had no heat in the winter, no AC in the hot sun. Next to my bed was rats, leftovers, they got some. I used to wonder why me, while seeing on TV, dudes with Beamers, Jaguars, of course Mercedes. Being broke as a kid used to drive me crazy. Hearing the guns at night, I couldn't sleep like a baby. But now I make it plain, I'm writing this on a plane, on my way to California for a show. What changed? Well, I stopped making excuses. For myself to blame. You take control of your life, you can do the same. It don't matter, you've been abused, grew up with no parents, you dealt with booze, dealt with drugs, wheelchair rampant. Maybe you grew up poor, in a house, not a home. Maybe mom's was an addict, papa rolling stone. What you gotta see is life is just testing you out, to see if you'll take an easy route, to see if you'll throw the towel and surrender your soul to a life of crime, a life of loss, life out of control. But if you take a step back, think twice, get some goals. If you focus on your dreams and not your nightmares, you'll see your life get better with your new mindset. Get new experiences that you won't forget. I took control of my life. Now I travel the globe. I met Clinton, Obama, Maya Angelou. I might be the next man on the cover of O. You take control of your destiny. You never know. I've been on BET, BBC, CNN. I've been to 20 countries, spoke for 4 millions. Now they don't call me a monster, less than beast in the flow. They don't call me nothing but the goat at the show. So what can you do if you focus on great? More than me, probably, if you concentrate. Get the haters out your life. Stop lifting dead weight. And listen to no one who ever said wait. You take control of your dreams and develop yourself. If you eat the right foods and develop your health, you live the life of your dreams. Trust me, you'll see, because you got nothing but greatness in your destiny. Good evening. How y'all doing? Y'all good?
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Y'all to get that energy out to start playing random instrumentals and get y'all out your seats and everything. So we're going to do something a little bit different tonight. I want y'all to be relaxed. I want y'all to have fun. This is going to be part motivation. This is going to be part looking at things relating to educational theories and what it takes to develop a growth mindset. So just relax, have fun. I'm the one who's speaking, so y'all can relax and I'll be the one who's tense and stressed out. So one of the things I learned about growth mindsets is that people who are working to develop growth mindsets, they're going to remember everything that they say to themselves better than something a speaker will say to them, right? So we're going to have a little exercise here where you all are going to say a few things to yourself. So please repeat after me. Today I give myself permission.
Today I give myself permission.
Sorry, I forgot to say it like you mean it. Today I give myself permission.
Today I give myself permission.
To no longer be a volunteer victim.
To no longer be a volunteer victim.
I will live life by my own rules.
I will live life by my own rules.
And no longer listen to liars, haters, and fools.
And no longer listen to liars, haters, and fools.
I will take control of my own destiny.
I will take control of my own destiny.
And let no one get the best of me.
And let no one get the best of me.
For if it is meant to be,
For if it is meant to be,
it is up to me.
it is up to me.
Give yourselves a round of applause. You're all rappers now. I want to thank you all for this opportunity, Dr. Trent, Dr. Aldridge, Dr. Caroline Screen, for giving me the opportunity to come down to the University of Virginia and share my experiences with this wonderful course that we call multicultural education, and to have this opportunity to be here tonight to really speak about my experiences, because quite honestly, when you come from certain types of neighborhoods, if you don't develop your own type of growth mindset, then literally you become a victim of whatever it is before you. My experiences speak directly to growing up in some of our more impoverished neighborhoods in America. But the experiences that I'm going to talk about tonight can translate into many experiences of people in this room, many who may be coming from an immigrant experience, or maybe coming from a poor or rural community, or maybe dealing with other types of challenges, physical challenges, emotional challenges. The fact of the matter is many of us have to develop growth mindsets because our educational systems have failed in assisting us to do so. And so in order to succeed, we feel like we have to do it on our own. So I want to share some experiences that I grew up with that led me to have to develop either grow or perish, literally. And I want to look at some ways that our educational system failed us and really pose some questions to what we can do as educators, as professors, as school leaders, as graduate students, as undergraduate students, to really work towards helping our young people develop a growth mindset. But I also like to have fun. So I'm going to start this off with a game. I want to give somebody in here $100. I know it can get you only like a tank of gas nowadays, but being 100 air is better than being a millionaire. Or, well, not really. Better than being a zero air, right? How about that? So I'm going to give y'all $100. Y'all cool? I know y'all got these massive UVA salaries and stuff. So like $100 is nothing. But some of you all, heads are going this way. Oh, sorry. Some of you all, Harris, might benefit from this. So here's the simple game. I'm going to tell you my full name, and whoever can tell me my name back to me will win $100. So if I say my name was Kobe Bryant, you say my name is
Kobe Bryant.
Win $100. If I say my name was Bill Clinton, you say my name is win $100. Ready? Now remember, the words listen and silent have the same letter, so you can't do one without doing the other, right? Poet taught me that. So my name is Omékongo Dibinga watching Tukasa. Try it again. No recorded playbacks on devices and things. Try it again. Omékongo Dibinga watching Tukasa. $100 like your life online.
Wait, you dropped off. Try that again.
I dropped off? Oh. Third time. Now, when I do this with students across the globe, I only do this twice and they still never get it. But all these overachievers in here, I'll do it one more time. Omékongo Dibinga watching Tukasa. Going once. Going twice. It's safe to say that we're not sold here. That's okay. Look, I wanted to do that to have fun. Like I get paid now to go and speak across the globe and make fun of my name and talk about these issues, but quite real, seriously, growing up as a child in a faraway place called Boston, Massachusetts, where I was born and raised, go Red Sox, no Celtics. I don't like what they did to my team, but that's just a whole other section. I was very confused as a child because I couldn't say my name. I could speak it, but saying it literally, growing up in Boston, Massachusetts, 1970s, 1980s, 90s, literally it was fighting words. Because I grew up in a society where people hated people of African descent. My parents, retired Harvard professors, Boston College professors, democratic freedom fighters for the Congo, where they came from, and eventually settling down in Boston, Massachusetts. We were tormented in school and in our neighborhood because of our backgrounds. So I had 3 strikes going against me growing up. Number 1 was just the pain that came with saying my name. In school, being beaten up, having rocks thrown at us, my oldest brother being shot in the eye, simply because we were different. You don't hear a stereotypical accent coming from me, but once saying my name, I was othered easily. So being names thrown at me like African bush boogie, African booty scratcher, my geographically challenged friends calling me an Asian butt scratcher because like Haiti was part of Africa, but they were reaching, so I had to give them some credit. That was my existence, that was my experience. That was strike 1 going against me. Number 2, I didn't grow up, as you may have heard in the poem, with a lot of money. So in my household, we were dealing with various experiences of not having heat in the coldest of winter days. To these days, I still remember having to cover our stove with a blanket during the coldest winter nights like this week in order to keep ourselves warm. My quote-unquote friends joking to want to go play outside where it was warm. Having to share clothes at school, one of us wearing the gym shoes one day, the other person wearing the nicer shoes the next day, depending on if there were class pictures or something going on. Having a house infested with rats, many of the experiences that you may see on these commercials with starving Africans was my experience in Boston, Massachusetts, and it's the experience of many K-12 students in Charlottesville as we speak. I spent some time in these schools since I've been coming here over the last 2 years. That was strike 2. Strike 3, I grew up at the height of what many of us affectionately call the crack epidemic, where many young Black and Latino males were being incarcerated or murdered at rates that can't even be comprehended nowadays. To such an extent that I vividly remember young Black males walking around with t-shirts saying Black males, endangered species. Because it was predicted that we wouldn't live past the age of 15, and if we made it to 25, then God had truly blessed us in some way, shape, or form. Those were my experiences growing up in Boston, Massachusetts. I thought going to school would be a place where I could be free, a place where I could be liberated, a place where I could be myself, a place where I can get assistance and helping myself get to the next level and raise myself out of those circumstances. But in school, I was met with the same ignorance that I received from my students. I received the same level of ignorance from my teachers, from the people who are supposed to be my educators. They tall school the great equalizer, and we know in this room that that's a lie. At the end of the day, school became a bigger problem, which I'll get to a little bit later, of my being able to develop a growth mentality, and I thought it was something that was supposed to assist me. So I realized 7th grade year was probably the most pivotal year in my life. This was the year that my father went to Zambia to do some work. While in Zambia, there was an assassination attempt on his life. As I share my story, think of the story of the students you go before at UVA, in your K-12 institutions that you may work in currently. There was an assassination attempt on his life. They bashed his head in with a crowbar one evening. And so my entire 7th grade year, my father was in a coma, awake. That year, I came out of the 6th grade school, went up to 6th grade, K-6 school, honors classes there and everything, doing my thing, feeling like I was worth something. Transferred to this school called Boston Latin School, which is the oldest school, public school in the country, older than Harvard, founded in 1635. Got into the school and grades skyrocketed, in terms of skyrocketed downwards, right? Because quite honestly, number one, I already did not want to be there. Father absent from my life also made me feel like I was dealing with my own situations of what am I going to do? So I went from being in a situation where I was an honor student in the 6th grade, father in a home, to transferring to this prestigious school and not wanting to be there and no fatherly figure. And I remember the first day of school, my headmaster telling me, look to your left, look to your right. By the time it's time to graduate, many of you all will not be here. And so I felt like he was speaking directly to me. And I rose to those expectations that were set for me. By the time school year was over, we had 35 grades, 27 of those of mine were F's. Because we had gym, my boss, so I passed gym, right? So, just keeping it real. Repeated that year. But here's the thing that was very interesting. As I look back at my experiences, I never recall a teacher asking me, hey, they shortened Omékongo Dibinga, I guess they watch it to O. Talk about cultural competency. They hey, how's your day going? What's going on in your world? What experiences are you dealing with today? All they knew was that I was this black child in this classroom who was not meeting their expectations. Or maybe the fact that I got held back, maybe I was meeting their expectations. Maybe I was that person who was not going to be there at the end of the year. So school was failing me there. I recall in school that from grade 7 to grade 12, I read one book by a black author, conveniently entitled Invisible Man, by Mr. Ralph Ellison. Spoke to my experience. For some reason, the pictures of Shaka Zulu during Black History Month just didn't speak to me. Because I knew for the rest of my school days, those other 160 days, there was going to be nothing there for me. So how was that school going to help me develop a growth mentality? They definitely weren't praising my effort. They definitely weren't praising my intelligence because they thought I didn't have it. Miraculously, Pops came back at the end of my 7th grade year. Developed a little bit of amnesia, seriously, because torture, being stretched in different directions, dealt with a lot of different things while in Congo as well as in Zambia. He forgot, literally, that he made me go to that school in the first place. I tested him, I didn't want to be there. And so he said when the school assignment form was placed in front of me, where do you want to go next year? I could have went back to my underperforming school where I was an honor student, but I thought about that headmaster who said, look to your left, look to your right. By the time we graduate, many of y'all won't be here. And I said, check that form, I'm going back to Boston Latin School. And I decided that if the schools were not going to motivate me, and I was not going to get motivation in my hood by my peers, I needed to find something to motivate me. Because if you come from any challenging experience, like I said, mine is the hood. Y'all may be war-torn areas or anything going on, alcoholism in your household, drug abuse, whatever it is. Whenever you get that opportunity to shine, you don't want to lose it, right? So I told myself, I'm going back there. So this same kid was told he wasn't going to be anything. I graduated that same school as a member of the National Honor Society. Why? Not because of anything my teachers did. I turned to my own history to find pride. I turned to this man. I turned to great leaders from Congo like Patrice Lumumba, great other African leaders, Nelson Mandela and others. And I decided that I wanted to use them as my source of motivation to take myself to the next level. There were 4 simple things that I had to do. We talk about develop a growth mentality. 4 simple things that I had to do, which we don't encourage our students to do. I had to develop a mentality of learning how to give back, because nobody was giving anything to me. I had to learn how to develop a strategy of release, letting negative people in my life go, and learning to forgive. That's R, by the way, like give, G, R, get it for me. I had to learn to overcome, which is I had to overcome my fears of success, and I had to develop a mentality of winning, believing that I was going to win every single day. So that child who was told that he was never going to be anything, I've gone on to study at Harvard, Morehouse, Princeton, MIT, Georgetown, doing my PhD right now. They told me my voice would never be heard. I've been televised in over 150 countries. They told me that people would never hear or see my work. I produced 7 CDs and 6 books. But I wonder what my life could have been how different it could have been. Could I have reached some of my successes a little bit sooner if I had a school system that gave a damn about me and about where I came from and about my experiences. Now as an educator myself, I realized that the way we set up our structure, our educational structure, it's almost impossible for educators, unless they make real concerted efforts to learn about their students, it's almost impossible to really care about the people who are before us. So what challenge does that give us here at UVA? For those of us who are professors or grad students or undergrads, what is it that we need to be doing to take ourselves to that next level? To really show that every student in front of us has the ability to achieve. And I'm not just talking about you who teach K-12, I'm talking about you as well who teach undergrads here, who really believe that. I do diversity consulting and trainings across the country in many different educational counties, and I'll never forget an experience. And I was in a DC public school, and this school had no sports teams because no one in the school had above a C average. This was a high school, Northwest DC, the great Northwest of DC. And this principal saw this student coming down the hallway, black female principal, black student, male student. And, let's just say his name was Kareem or something. And she was like, "Hey, Kareem, how you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm doing great, Miss Johnson. Everything is fine." She's like, "Oh, yeah, get to class. Make sure you study hard. Make sure you do all of those things." And he said, "Yeah, I got it, Miss Johnson. It's all good." As soon as he turned the corner, she said, "You know what? He's going to make a great prisoner one day." First thing that popped into my head was, you shouldn't be in the classroom. Because regardless of what you say to students, they always pick up on what our intentions are really. So the first issue, the first challenge that I believe we need to address as educators, as it relates to aiding our students in developing a growth mentality, is really questioning whether we believe that all students have the ability to succeed. My experiences, 20 countries doing this work, looking at marginalized populations across the globe. I do work on behalf of the State Department and travel to countries where people are marginalized because of ethnicity and religion and political affiliations. And I'm seeing in some of these countries where they're experiencing war, some of the same challenges we experience here in this country with students who are before us. So the first question becomes, what do we do to raise our own expectations of what we believe our students can do? Because from my experiences, it would be very hard for you to convince me that school is nothing but a pyramid scheme designed to get certain people to the top and keep certain people at the bottom. If I am wrong, why is it that across this country you can go to literally any county, and if you remove race from indicators on your bar graphs of achievement, you can predict who's at the top and who's at the bottom? Why is that? Is it as simple as blaming the children? That's like blaming the paper when the copier breaks. The issue is our system. The issue is what we produce and who we feel has the rights to get the keys to the proverbial kingdom. I believe, number one, as educators, the first thing that we need to do is we need to step back and check ourselves. Really look at what it is that brought us to this thing we call education? What brought us to decide that we can make a difference in these lives, if we've decided to do that at all? When I was teaching in Boston Public Schools, one of the things they used to say is that, my principal is fond of saying, some of us have this mentality of those who can do and those who can't teach. Right? Because we don't really look at our students as anything but minions, little subjects to help boost our own careers. The first step, I believe this issue of cultural competency is real. So what are we doing here at UVA to really challenge ourselves there? I spent several days last semester at Charlottesville High School, and the population that is in that school is just incredible as it relates to diversity. But I'll tell you, I left that school on many occasions feeling sad, because I felt like some of these students were not getting what they need in order to help take them to the next level. So I want to give you all some steps of what we can do to help develop a growth mentality for our students who are before us. Does that work for y'all? Yeah. I hope. And in Q&A we can discuss all of this, because quite honestly, whether it's a racial thing, which was in the case of me, whether it's an issue of people who are dealing with various types of physical challenges, or whether it's people who are dealing with linguistic barriers in their educational system, so many students have already given up on thinking that this school can reach them, and that our school system can reach them in any way, shape, or form. But I believe strongly that when we have conscious educators on this issue, we can really make a difference. So the first step has nothing to do with the students. It has everything to do with you all in this room. Checking ourselves. Unpackaging our own baggage about the people who are before us. It's easy to go and talk about, I'm going to learn about this culture and what they do. But what about your own perceptions about the people who are before you? You know, there's a thing that was written that talks about, it's not Boykin, I remember the author's name, and give it to me if you know this author's name. You know, he talks about these stages of racialized development. And he talks about, how at different levels, our opinions and strategies and our mentalities change based on the experiences that we have. So were you somebody who, for example, was a lover of the Muslim culture until 9/11 happened and you lost a cousin in the tower? Does that change your perspective? Does it change how you interact with the Muslim students who are before you? Do you feel like you have no problems with anybody of different racial backgrounds until you get robbed by a black man? And then the black male children in your classroom get treated a little bit differently? Do you get upset with something you may see on television relating to anything, and then come to school and take it out on your kids? I remember distinctively when Barack Obama won the election in 2008, and I was working in Montgomery County schools at that particular time. And we were literally told as staff development teachers, please, whatever you do, don't talk about Barack Obama today, because teachers are still pissed off that he won. Now, I voted for him. But check this out. As an educator, somebody who really cares about the experiences of people, of youth, and more importantly, the father of two daughters, if a Hillary Clinton or a Sarah Palin, won the election, do you think I wouldn't go home to my daughters and say that this is an example of how a woman can rise to the highest level and put my ego to the side? You see, as educators, we have to learn to remove our ego. EGO, edging goals out. We have to learn to put that aside. We get so personal in everything that takes place, and we think we're objective. We think that we don't come to the classroom with any of that baggage. You mean that you're going to tell me, as a staff development teacher in this school where your black males are not achieving, that I can't show them that if they pull their pants up and pull their grades up, they could be a possible president instead of a potential prisoner? You're going to tell me that I can't walk into that special ed class where they make the majority of, and I can't talk about something different to expand their possibilities because you're upset? That's a serious problem that we as educators face. We think we're so objective, so colorblind, so unbiased, that we fail to unpack our own baggage. That's step number one. Number two, one of the issues that we also fail to do is we fail to engage our students. Forget about we'll get to the cultural proficiency and all that stuff, we'll get to that. But simple engagement. How do I go through a whole 7th grade year and nobody finds out that my father's in a coma? in a foreign country? Is it because they think my father's not in the home anyway? Because that whole 72% of families have only one, a mother in the household? Do they become victims of those same expectations? That was a problem. I had a student when I was in Montgomery County who said, my father died of AIDS and my mother is dying from cancer. Nobody asked me how my day's going. Had students who told me, you have no idea what I have to do just to get to the door. Just to get to the door. Have we forgotten that our students have challenges just getting out of the building during the day? What are we doing to learn, to engage them? And then once we think about that, then we can start looking at this thing of what we're really doing to respect them and their differences and their background and where they come from. We have this mentality in America, you must speak the King's English, you must come in here, you must blend in. But how can people really blend in when they don't know the rules of the game? And we don't know the rules of the game from where they come from. Case in point, you gave me a group of students, traditional, say, Muslim students from, say, Pakistan, girls, and you put them in my classroom. I guarantee you, all of them would probably fail if I didn't take the time to learn about them. What if I asked a couple of questions and learned they're not even supposed to be in front of a male teacher? You're not even supposed to be in my presence because that's a system that they came from. Or someone called people who come from different cultures like my own in Congo, where you're not even supposed to look an adult in the eye. But in this culture, look at me when I'm talking to you. And if they can't, they're out. We live in a system now where it's easier to get rid of our students than engage them. To get them out of the classroom, to get them out of school. Saw a situation in New York where a girl was arrested, middle school, for writing on a desk that she loves her friends. Not only is that ridiculous, but we probably killed her dream as an artist. Because she was arrested for something like that, because we have tough love policies. What are we going to do? How are we going to change a system where in the schools that you may teach or you may come from or that you may work with as a professor here, maybe you're working, with some other K-12 schools, have you really examined your schools? Have you looked at their discipline, or do you just accept it as it is? Some of our schools, many of our schools, you have 20% of teachers who make 80% of referrals in both directions. Who gets invited to gifted and talented AP honors classes, and who gets a detention, suspension, expulsion. And this is nationwide. Nationwide. Marian Wright Edelman, she wrote about our preschool to prison pipeline. How can we as educators just accept that? It's not 1983, but we still are a nation at risk. Particularly when we look at other nations and how they're surpassing us. My belief, if we want to talk about really developing a growth mindset, it's important to, yes, look at effort over intelligence. Of course that matters. But I believe that we as educators, if we're serious about this thing called educators, we need to pay serious attention to what Fiera talked about as relates to that banking model. Because most people who are banking this information into don't have accounts in this culture, in this system. We need to really look at what we need to do to become better and stronger about how we engage the people who are before us. Because whether we know it or not, students are always going to rise to the expectations that are set for them. One example I gave yesterday in the multicultural education class is there was a motivational speaker who passed away by the name of Zig Ziglar. And he said once that there was a baseball player, famous baseball player, who went into a prison with another one of his famous baseball player friends. They were speaking and giving motivational talks. And the baseball player said, you know what? My dad always told me that, one day if I just keep swinging that bat, I'm going to play in the pros. And one day, look at me. I'm exactly where he said I'm going to be. And the prisoner who was standing next to him, he said, you know what? I'm exactly where my dad said I'm going to be too. Many of those guys in there are exactly where they said their teachers were going to be. Where society said that they were going to be. And we as educators have a duty to make sure that we're doing our best to serve everybody. I'm doing my PhD, my dissertation on a great philosopher by the name of Jay-Z. And yes, he's a philosopher. Why not, right? Is he not allowed to be in that list of people? Why? Because he was a drug dealer? But here's the question. How is it that a guy who in the 6th grade was testing on standardized tests as a senior drops out of high school? Did he fail or did we fail him? Said, I'll never forget what my teacher said. Said, I'd either be dead or a reefer head. I don't know if that's how you're supposed to talk to kids when all I try to do was speak in class. Those are his lyrics. We fail, but we rather condemn hip-hop. Call Beyonce a whore for a Grammy performance. Call him a thug. Call Sherman a thug. We'd rather do that than look at the conditions that create a Lil Wayne, a Jay-Z, a 2 Chainz. That's a cop-out. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a cop-out. It's too easy for us to blame the products of the system. In an institution like this, we should be looking at what we can do and our responsibility about what are we really doing for others to really work harder to change this system. If we do not do that, we will continue to be part of the problem and not part of the solution. If we want to talk about developing growth mentalities, we have to believe that every student has the capability to grow and stop cutting them off at the roots. I am a poet. I believe in growth. I believe in greatness. And so I'm going to end this section of what we're doing today with a poem just challenging you all to be great. Because once we realize our greatness, we'll help others do the same. Is that all right with you?
Yeah. Yes. Oh.
They say that greatness is a choice, but what have you chosen? You've been frozen in time and broken in mind. For too long, the same song playing in your head. Living in breath, but better off dead. But who said that you didn't have the power? Who said this is not your hour? You've been showered with a steady stream of words that kill your dreams. But since you're still breathing, then someone that lied to you, tried to deny you of your own potential inside you. If you just decide to, let no one deride you. Don't even let them get beside you as you unearth the new you. Stop listening to naysayers and decide to do you. No more pity party, sob stories, and boo-hoos. If no one told you that you're great, then let me be the first to. If you develop the thirst to drink from Faith's fountain, you develop the might to move mountains. You see, we remove tons of dirt to find 1 ounce of gold. So I ask you to remove tons of hurt and just uncover 1 ounce of your soul. You'll set yourself on a true path of excellence, getting out of your passenger seat and driving your own car, reaching for the moon, but maybe only landing among the stars. You see, you have greatness inside you, but you must choose to be great. Blaze a path of excellence for our students, leaving fear in their wake. All you need is already inside you. You just must believe in yourself. Grow towards your greatness. Help others grow towards their greatness and discover your true wealth. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for telling us your story, your journey, Omékongo. And I hope that, well, I know, because there were things that spoke to me and that you talked about and took me back to times when people didn't think that I was able to rise to the occasion and do well. And I'm sure that occurred, or that brought back memories for all of you as well. At this point, we're going to continue on, and we're going to have our panelists come and to share their stories about the hurdles that they face in developing a growth mindset and a growth mentality, and those people and resources that help them to get to where they are today. So if you all would come forward now. Yeah. So if you all will take about 10 minutes to give us your stories. And
20 seconds.
2 minutes apiece, not.
Okay. Can you hear me? Thank you.
Is it on?
Like, needs to be green.
Oh, that's right.
Sorry. This one.
Okay. My name is Chapin Faulkner, and as Dr. Trent said, I am a mental health therapist and actually a watercolor artist as well. I got my undergraduate degree from UVA and my master's from the Crow School as well, and there used to be a mental health counseling program. And I guess I really honestly, I never heard of a growth mindset until Dr. Trent told me I had one. Yeah. Come and be a speaker here tonight. And I guess for me, when I figured out, I guess when I look back now, I kind of used my growth mindset when I was 18. I was in a car accident, and I now have a spinal cord injury. So basically, I'm paralyzed from my shoulders down. I can move my arms a little bit. Obviously, I'm in a wheelchair. I cannot walk. And my accident was actually the day of my high school graduation. I graduated in the morning and had my accident that night, so it was kind of quite a double header. And so kind of as I sat there in the car, I thought, well, gosh, first of all, am I going to get out of here alive? And kind of after that, what next? And so I was hospitalized for about 7 to 8 months, and kind of during that time, I did physical therapy, rehab. I had been accepted to UVA, prior to my injury, and then I just that summer, deferred, and there was never a question, kind of for me, or really with my family. I was expected to go to UVA when I got out of the hospital. A lot of my nurses and social workers came in and said, we need to get your daughter signed up for disability, and we need to, get your house converted. So, we got my house converted, and we figured out how to do transportation. But my family's like, no, she's not signing up for disability. And, fortunately, on one hand, my family could afford to take care of me. But on the other hand, there was also the sense that that might be a dead end. There might be this expectation that, well, I'm just going to sit at home and kind of get a check. So I, a year later, went to UVA, and I lived in the dorms and lived there kind of full-time and was a regular student. And at that time, I really had to figure out how to be a student again, because I couldn't go to class and take notes. I was very self-conscious socially. And so I had to kind of just use maybe the skills that I'd learned previously. And so it was just having to, I think, just kind of dig deep and just use what I'd learned before and, kind of go through it. And fortunately, I did. And, I now go back, and my sister was actually a student of Dr. Trent's, and I've come back and talked to several of his classes now. And I now go to schools and just talk about my accident and my disability. And kind of along the way, after my injury, I became a watercolor painter too. And I now paint actually with a paintbrush in my mouth. I didn't bring it in my paintings with me, but I've had several shows. And when I take my paintings to places, they'll look at it, and the first thing a lot of people say is like, oh my God, I can't do that. And, when I talked to these students, I was in a class in 8th grade yesterday, and that was one of the first things that all of them thought, oh my gosh, I can't even do that. And I have to get them to stop and say, wait a second. If I can paint with my mouth, there's absolutely nothing that can stop you, and it's really just about your mindset. And I think that's just kind of my message to most people, that absolutely there are things that I cannot do. I can no longer play tennis or go skiing. I can. with adaptive equipment. But again, I think it's really just about your mindset. And I'm not an educator, but I guess formally, but now, for me, it's really important just that people don't necessarily see me as kind of disabled, but trying to figure out what I can do. And I use this as an example. When I was in a spinal cord support group, they asked us to define disability. And everybody's like, oh, it's a handicap, or I was in a group of guys, so they had a lot of other choice words to describe disability. And the woman thought I was kind of being a smart aleck, but for me, the way I defined my disability, as I said, it was a burden placed on a superior individual in order to equalize the competition. For me, I've had to kind of use that in my life just as a way to kind of get through those hard times. And so that's my story.
So, my name is Warren McLean. I like Chapin, I did not know I had a growth. I knew I had, I guess, I didn't, no one had ever told me I had a growth mindset in that sense until Dr. Trent twisted my arm.
Until I heard the story.
Well, until you heard my story, I guess in terms of my story, I have to be honest and transparent in this sense, in ways that I probably have never been to a large group to be able to tell my story. I'll tell people in small group settings, like we had the conversation and it was just us two. But in terms of that, I think for me, I guess to understand my story is, I grew up in a house with an abusive father. He was abusive in every way but sexually. He was abusive physically, verbally, emotionally, every way possible. But he just didn't touch us, which was great. We appreciated that. But it was, and I saw that from as early on as I could remember. And to the point that growing up, like my parents are black, I literally assumed black people shouldn't be together. Because I didn't understand how these two black people were in the house and couldn't get along. And it was just a weird thing. And this is my child mind, mine as a child processing through this. But so because of many of those experiences, home was not where I wanted to be. School became my safe place. And I was never necessarily told at school that I was smart or bright. I was in the advanced classes, so I guess that could be an indicator, but I was never told anything like that. But at home, my mother tried to get our minds off of the physical abuse that was happening, and in turn reinforce some positive things in us, right? So you couldn't convince me I wasn't smart. My mother told me I was brilliant, so that's why I was reading her paper. My mother told me that all the time. But in telling me that, I also knew that I was working really hard. It's hard to get a lot of work done. It's hard to get schoolwork done when you come home and you don't know if you're going to get your head slammed into a wall, and still try to make honor roll, So in thinking back on that, as a child, it probably didn't hit me, really hit me until 8th grade, when I came home one day and my father, who, like I said, I don't know if I mentioned, he's a terrible alcoholic and still is to this day. But he called me in his room and he tried to get me to drink his beer. He grabbed my hand and tried to force the beer down my throat. I probably didn't tell you all this. He tried to force the beer down my throat, and he said, "You'll be just like me when you grow up, don't you? You're going to be just like me when you grow up." And to me, that was the click. Like, no, I will not be like you. One of the things my mom always told me, she always reminded us my father's smart too. He just didn't do anything with it. I mean, it was a good thing in a sense. I mean, I guess you can look at it like, oh, she's talking bad about my father. At the same time, she's saying he was smart. He did well in math and science. In her mind, and for her, when they met in high school, he was smart. So he didn't do anything with it. So make sure if you have potential to use it. But in I think it was 8th grade where that situation happened. But I decided I wasn't going to be like that. The benefit that I also had was my grandfather. My mother's father was just remarkable. It doesn't get much better than my grandfather. I always just joke that my grandfather was like Jesus, Moses, and James Bond. because my grandfather, for every bad example my father may have given me, my grandfather gave me the exact opposite. He was the kindest man, the gentlest man, the smart. My grandfather never finished high school, but he was the smartest man I know. He was very proud to be able to, while he didn't finish high school, he was able to go and get trained as an auto mechanic and as a barber. He was able to make a living on the side from this full-time job doing those things. But I was able to see that example. And I truly don't necessarily know if I would have been able to achieve any level of success without seeing that example. But what I call, I always say I have the example and the anti-example. In that sense, right? A lot of people have one or the other. If you want to think about it as positive, I had both. I had what I absolutely didn't want to be, but I also had something that I could model myself after. And my grandfather, my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother's mother always reinforced in me that you can do these things. But at the same time, that you can do well in school, that you can do well in math, that you can do well in science, you can do these things. And for me, I guess I could have taken it in the sense that, I'm just naturally smart, but I also knew that I was putting in a lot of work around trying to get work done at the same time trying to survive at home in that sense. I'm trying to think where to go next. Going into high school, it was I was not so bad in terms of trying to keep pushing forward and trying to excel. Again, math and science was my in many ways it was my out, right? It was my out of this situation. It was my way to not have to live in this poverty and live from paycheck to paycheck in many ways. And I went to a high school that was 94% black, and it's still that way today. And I say it like I'm old, right? I graduated in 1997 from high school. But when my mother graduated from the same high school in 1970, it was probably 99% black. So and when you look at it like that, not a whole lot has changed, right? I was around a lot of kids that were doing the same things that I was doing, excelling in the same ways that I was excelling. However, when I got to college, when I say around the same kids, I was around a lot of black kids that were doing well in math and science. So it didn't necessarily occur to me that I would be hit with these stereotypes of black students not doing well in math and science when I got to college. Until I got to college and got hit with some of those stereotypes where I was oftentimes not, I couldn't get in working groups with people. It was very difficult to establish relationships in classes. I was told once in college that I was the only black student in my robotics class. I remember being told, "What are you doing here? You don't belong in here," by one of the white students. I don't even know you. All right. Which I guess in that sense, for me, I became one of those people. You tell me I'm not going to do something, I'm going to do exactly that. So I remember getting an A on every test in robotics, probably killed myself to do. But it was for me, it was a matter of I cannot be what, like Omékongo said, I don't want to be what they said I would be. I don't want to be what my father said I would be. I want to be what my mother, my grandfather, and my grandmother said I would be, which was brilliant, which was smart, which was someone who could, I mean, outside of my father, no one in my family actually excels at math and science, you know. So for my mother and my father, you know how people position math and science as if it's like the holy grail. So outside of them, they always looked at it as like, you know, my son does this that we don't do. So for them, I wanted to be what they said I could be, and I never wanted to let it stop me. So in terms of, I guess, the growth mindset, I always wanted to push forward to make sure I wasn't like what the negative messages were being sent towards me, but more so like the positive messages. I'm sure I went home. I had a tendency to do that.
Hi everybody, I'm Julie Roa. I work for the Office of Dean of Students. I've been at UVA as a professional for about 8 years. In terms of my story, it's hard to know what to really say. I'm really blessed with really having a bad memory. So I sort of go through life obliviously, and it helps. I moved to the States when I was 12 years old, and I grew up in Colombia in South America. The 90s were a tough time in Colombia, and I don't remember a lot of things. I know that my dad's business had failed. There were some tough times there. There wasn't much of a choice about leaving, pursuing the American dream, etc. We moved to the States, ended up in Charlottesville, actually went to a school system here, where, from what I remember, I had a lot of support. Now, again, I don't remember much, but I know that I was the only one who picked up English in my family for many years. So I was translating for, trying to get our papers straightened out, getting my job, my dad through some interviews to get him a job, my mom also, just anything that had to do with reading mail and navigating systems, figuring out buses, like all this stuff, I was the go-to. And it's kind of like, in reading this article about the growth mindset, it was kind of neat to sort of see that it never was about the outcome with my family. It was more about the process, right? So we never expected any of us to really know what we were doing, or to do it right, or to do it wrong. So that was a blessing, because it wasn't like if I had a C, we were unaware. If I had an F, I went through school and it was like, am I learning? I need to pick up these skills because somebody needs to know how to get around. And people, I guess my parents, my brother, sister were proud of me constantly, right, for figuring it out. And it's something that I really kind of got addicted to. So studying, I got into UVA and other places, ended up going here because my family lived in, locally. But I couldn't wait to go and figure it out again. So I actually moved to Germany and learn German because I was like, I want to be somewhere that can teach me to be on time. That seriously, that was my mindset. I'm I need to learn how to be on time to places. I'm moving to Germany, and it didn't teach me actually. But anyway, and then I graduated with a degree in that. I was like, I want to do it again. I want to go to China, and I went to China, and that was awesome. And so now, anytime I get a chance, I go travel. So I feel maybe it could have been hard. Now thinking back, there were moments. that there was homelessness, but it wasn't terrible. We were able to navigate it just fine. I'm so thankful to this country, right? Because there are services, there are places. You can get back on your feet. We almost got deported once, which was awful. I don't remember much of that either, thank God. But I know of it because of what my parents have had to sort of go through. And I guess that's my story. I honestly, reading this, it talks a lot about loving to learn, right? And that's what sort of gets you through. In my work currently with undergraduates who are both immigrants and non-immigrants, they identify their own personalities, their own identities are so different depending on how they grew up, their socioeconomic status, their religion, their linguistic background, their, what's happening at home. in working with them, I just see the mentality, the growth mindset in some and sort of the fixed mindset in others. And as an educator, it's very difficult for me sometimes to know how much to push, where to put my standards, right? And try not to lower them, and how much to just sort of give them credit for how much they're doing. Like that balance is something that I hope to learn from you all tonight, a little more about how to keep that art, such that whoever it is that you're working for can really benefit.
One of the things that I've noticed, and I want us to all remember, is that everyone has the stories about risk factors and protective factors. There were risk factors that put them in jeopardy of not achieving and accomplishing their goals, but there were also protective factors that pushed them forward and helped them to accomplish their goals. So our task, as we leave here, is to think about how we can become protective factors, protective agents for the children, for the adults that we serve or that we hope to serve. So now for about 10-15 minutes, we will allow you all to have time to ask questions of our guests, and then Justin will come up and close us out. Questions?
Hello everyone, my name is Travis Harris, work here, alumnus of UVA Class 06 Religious Studies. So my question is this: I have a very similar story to you, Omékongo. I thoroughly enjoyed your talk because you position the school system's involvement in the failure of some of our American citizens. I often hear the responsibility placed on individuals who fail, and of course, ultimately, we are responsible for our own actions. My question is, what's the balance between recognizing the system that is in place that leads to the failure and the proverbial pull yourself up by your own bootstrap?
Even if you don't have boots?
Exactly. So yeah, what's the balance there? Because I know, like, where I came from, a lot of people don't succeed. A lot of people do go to jail. A lot of people are just not really doing much with their life. So yeah, what's that balance there?
There is no balance. And that's the sad part of it, is realizing that you either got to do it or you're dead, literally. Because for all of this talk about motivation and things we can do for students, quite honestly, given my experiences in this thing we call education in my travels, I've probably spoken to almost 100,000 youth in 20 countries and looking at how educational systems work. It's hard to be very optimistic that our educational system is going to catch up with these things that we're talking about. We have in the United States, we have an educational system that was developed for rich white boys hundreds of years ago. Those people do not make up the majority of any public school classroom, but we have a system that operates for them. Whether it's, white girls who are in the classroom now, or immigrants, or black kids, or whatever, it's just different. And this country hasn't adjusted. So I spend most of my time and most of my energy talking to the youth to let them know you can't wait for us as adults to get our act together. You got to do it yourself. One of the things Jay-Z says in his book, Decoded, which I found really fascinating, he was like, I take responsibility for all of the choices that I made, but realistically, I didn't have a lot of choices. I maybe could have done some things better, but I came from a community that the government was really literally trying to make disappear. When you look at the work of, the work on our prison statistics, he's right. When you look at some of our crack versus cocaine statistics, who's incarcerated, when you look at some of the issues in terms of our underserved communities, in terms of who gets what resources based on the tax bases that they come from in their schooling system, in their neighborhoods, he's right. So there is no balance. You got to do it yourself, or it's a wrap. There's millions of people out there waiting to say what a great credit you are to your race. You know what I'm saying? Quote unquote. But until you get there, they're waiting for you to literally die. At least that's my perspective. I really feel like people are with, Jonathan Kajufu said this nation is trying to figure out what to do with the people it no longer needs. We built the universities, we built the Georgetowns and the George Washingtons and all of these other schools. There's really not a need for us anymore, except maybe to fund some war and Iran-Contra affairs and the like, right? Someone's got to take those drugs. So that's my mentality. There just isn't a balance. Do it or die. Don't wait for nobody to do it for you or to come around and say, oh, I was wrong, and really thinking you couldn't succeed. It doesn't work.
Anyone of you would like to add something to that?
I think, though, the danger of, that message is really wonderful when you're speaking to students who are at risk. The danger, though, of thinking about it simply from that perspective is that we also have a responsibility to be agents of change in any way that we can in our environments, even as small as those environments are. And so we have to think about what those structural elements are. We need to think about what those elements of the community are that are creating barriers for students to begin to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Maybe get a pair of ballet flats or something to start the process or whatever it is. So the idea is we have to think about what those are and take some responsibility at the community level, because if we just keep always saying let's pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, we're not going to change those barriers.
No, I agree with you 100%. We do need to be cognizant of our roles and what we can do. And, all of us were able to get where we are today because there were, some teachers or some people in our community who helped us. It would be ignorant for all of us to say we got here by ourselves. But what I am saying is that our students who are in need, they can't wait for educators to come around and realize that they have to make changes in terms of our pedagogy and the way that we view them. We have to, they have to keep persisting in hopes that there will be committed educators, so, educators who really believe that every child can succeed, who are going to come and help them push them along. But if they end up waiting for that their whole life, they may end up being rudely disappointed.
Sounds like a both and. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have a question for either one of any panelists. What do you see the role of the university be in training pre-service teachers who will be people on the ground? What is the role of the university in assisting pre-service teachers to be prepared to go out and be able to handle the diversity in classrooms?
Awkward stuff.
No, I think that one of the biggest challenges that schools of education have is getting their pre-service teachers to interrogate their own biases, to interrogate their own perceptions, to interrogate how they view others that are not black. And a lot of people want to dance around it. But if you're going to really effectively teach in public schools today, you have to interrogate how you view other people. And that includes everybody. That includes how black people view white people, how white people view black people, Asian people. Everybody views everyone. How everyone views everyone. You have to interrogate. And then once you come after you're interrogating, now how do you change that view to be understanding and less biased? In your interactions and in your instruction, because I think that so many people go in with this perception that it is about just the content, and it's not. It's not just about the content. Our biases come through, particularly when we're not aware of them. And if we're not willing to interrogate that about ourselves, and schools of education are willing to make people interrogate those, I should say make, but give pre-service teachers the opportunity to interrogate those and to make those changes, and we'll continue to repeat the same things that we've been dealing with for decades and centuries.
I would second that. I'd say, self-awareness is very, very important. also awareness of sort of the history of our educational system, why it ended up being the way it is, and looking at trends and not being afraid to question them. You know, is this a coincidence that this ends up being this way, or how is it that it ended up, looking the way it does? And I guess, being that we are the University of Virginia, empowering those teachers, right, to have a voice and use their voice when they are out in those systems. Because I feel like a lot of people just say, this is the way the system is, you gotta chug along, you gotta do your best where you are and sort of not raise any eyebrows. And so, too many people do that, nothing ever gets questioned.
But it's very dangerous.
It's dangerous, for sure.
It's dangerous to chug along. It's dangerous to chug along and blame it on the system, because once you step into your classroom, it's your classroom. And so few people get an opportunity to see what you do in the classroom, right? Even when I was an instructional specialist and I would go into classroom, I was there for a class period and I have to leave and go to somebody else's classroom, right? So few people get the opportunity to do that. And it really, everybody has to deal with it.
So it's dangerous to be vocal, but it's
I'm not saying it's dangerous to be
not
vocal. I'm not saying it's dangerous to be vocal. I would say it's dangerous to think about it just as a system issue with the system. In that sense.
Once again, both and. I think that's a lesson that we need to learn, that we need to look at. For every situation, sometimes we just look at one aspect of it, and there's also another side and another perspective that goes with it that we need to think about as well. I have a quick anecdote, and some of my students have heard this, but going back to the history and how we prepare teachers, one of the things that I think about in my teacher education program is that, in special education, is that I was prepared through a deficit lens. And I tell my students, in my teacher education program, my first special education professor taught characteristics of mental retardation. And he said, one of the things you're going to have to know in this class is the definition for mental retardation. You're going to have to say it backwards if I ask you. We had to do it on every quiz. We had to write the definition. He would sometimes just call on us, Michael, what's the definition for mental retardation? And we didn't know it, he would put a minus beside our names or something like that. So, and I was telling my students, when I really thought about it, the first time I thought about it 20 years later or so, when I became a professor, I said, I wonder if I still know that definition. Mental retardation refers to sub-average general intellectual functioning existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifesting itself during the developmental period. So, if you're trained to think that way, and when your students are not performing where they should be, then the first thing I thought was, it's not me. It's not me. There's something wrong with them, and I can't fix it. And I've heard so many folks talk like that. And that was in 1974, 75. There's so many, that same mentality is still with so many of us, so many school systems, so many teachers, and so many classrooms today. So that's one piece I think we have to address. Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, I guess I have a couple. It's a series of questions and kind of some statements, I guess, mixed in there. But are we trying to create an intellectual solution to an emotional issue? All you guys discussed your backgrounds, how our realities are constructed from our rearing. There seems to be a gap between privileged upbringing and that of our lives, because I share a lot of similarities as well. Don't we have to bridge that gap by intellectualizing emotional issues while also emotionalizing intellectual issues? After we can do that, can we form a policy which both sides, all sides, can understand and demand?
I just wanted to write it down so I didn't forget what you said, but I think the problem is that we don't add emotion to our intellectual analyses. So we teach teachers to sit, look, analyze things in a box. You know, I love quoting people like Zig Ziglar. He talked about some educators who went to a Native American village, and one of the things they found in all these different Native American villages that they looked at, they were surprised that nobody stuttered. And so they asked him, why does nobody stutter in all of these villages? And he said, well, nobody stutters because we don't have a word for stutter in this culture. So, well, what do we do in America is that we create terms, you know, EMR, emotion disturbed, and this and that, and then we create these huge fields where people base their whole research and salaries on proving these points. And if you beat numbers enough, you're going to find what you want, right? So that's part of the problem. You know, we have to add emotion to these intellectual discussions that we're having, because I don't believe that we need to have a special ed population in America. I believe that special ed students should be getting the same critical analysis and education that people in gifted and talented programs get. You know, they shouldn't be put in a place to sit and do a prison bid, right? Because what you do in special ed classes are the same as what they do in prison, in my opinion. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't students who may need to have different accommodations to how that they learn, but I'm talking about the category. I mean, there's a correlation between special ed and prison populations in terms of enrollment. Those types of issues, people can base their entire careers off of beating these numbers to prove their points because of these intellectual arguments. And that's where the problem comes in. You know, creating this whole thing about the achievement gap. Now I want to research who's for that. Well, who's writing about the teaching gap? That's where the real issue lies. And teachers who can't reach the students where they are. So I believe that it's because we claim to be devoid of emotion, that's part of the problem. You know, most of our students come from backgrounds of spirituality. It's huge to them. But all we want to do is number crunch, number crunch, number crunch. You have this slight accent, so you're going to special ed. You know, throwing kids who come to this country who speak like 3 languages in special ed because they have a couple of problems with some English words. You know what I mean? So that's the problem, is that we become slaves to the vocabulary as opposed to slaves to looking at getting each student to the next level. We focus on being master teachers. We have master teachers and our students are slaves, right? Master slaves, that's simple to me. I like to keep things simple. So I think that we need to personalize this stuff. When I'm in a classroom, when I'm with students, I look at every student as a potential president. You know, I ain't to say I was a perfect teacher by any means when I was in the classroom. I had issues, had to do professional development and the like, but one of my motivational mentors, Les Brown, says, don't look at me as what I am. Look at me as what I can be. This is a guy who makes $50,000 a year for speech as a speaker, who couldn't compete in speaking competitions because he was labeled EMR in the 50s. He wasn't even allowed to compete. You see what I'm saying? That's where I feel the challenge. We need to bring emotion into it instead of trying to leave it out like we're objective, because we're not.
I absolutely agree. I have a follow-on question for you. I grew up in the streets, or whatever you want to call it, but I see that emotional intelligence, that EQ, whatever you want to call it, the street smarts that people have on the street, they're parallel faculties, mental faculties, to that of the highest intellectuals. They're very, very similar. What I'm saying with that gap bridging is, why can't we speak the same language? Because it is the same language. It's just one has that emotional frequency in it, and the other depends on a mental frequency. There's a disconnect. That wire that's connecting our thoughts and our emotions is severed sometimes. And unless we can bridge that gap, then we'll be speaking on the same highway. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. And one of the things Jay-Z talks about when he's in all these boardroom meetings, people say, aren't you nervous when you're in these rooms with all these guys with MBAs from Penn and Harvard and stuff? It's like, nah, they read a lot of books. I lived a lot of life. So he has no problem. I mean, his life depended on, when he was doing drugs. It was life or death, literally. So what we fail to do in environments like this is we fail to accept other ways of attaining the same type of intelligence. And that's part of, we have these, keys to the castle, these keys to the kingdom, and we don't make room for that, for other people to get by. Like I say, Andre 3000, sorry for, no, what, he's a rapper, if you don't know him, you should know him. He's real good. You might remember Outkast. He says in one of his songs, he says, selling drugs is a sin, but so was telling young men that selling drugs is a sin without offering new ways to win. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we have to realize that there's many ways, many roads to arrive at this thing we call intelligence. And we shouldn't just be, like I said, these gatekeepers as it relates to who has the ability to articulate that. That's one of the problems, absolutely. Because street sense got many of us to where we are more so than the book knowledge. So there's a place for everything.
Are you really talking about just tearing down the walls, the lanes of educational?
I'm talking about creating doors within the walls so that other people can enter them. I'm not a nihilist, I'm not sitting here talking, we need to completely destroy this system. I'm a product of parents with 3 PhDs. I understand the role education can play, but I also understand the role educators have played in keeping people out of the system. And so I don't want to tear down these walls. I want to create opportunities for people to maybe come in the window or understand the people who had to come in the window because they had no other way to do that, and interrogate whether there is a place for them in this system. I believe that there is, and we need to interrogate that.
I wish we could go on, but we have to pay attention to time. Let's give our presenters another round.